Hey there, godly adventurers. I hope you had an absolutely wonderful Christmas and that you've kept the spirit of it and you've refreshed yourself in the gospel, spent some time with your friends and family, spent some time with the Lord, hopefully did some evangelizing. But I've deliberately saved this podcast for after Christmas because I wanted it to be more New Year's themed. And plus I was, stop me if you heard this one before, super busy. So with Christmas being wonderful and done with, we will put that aside and look forward to 2025. So you might notice that background's a bit different. No, it's not green screen. I'm actually in my car. I've had to drive somewhere other than my house because the internet's being a bit funny there and not a very strong signal. And to use Riverside, I have to be able to connect to the internet. So just taking myself to a nice little spot and have all the bars. So let's do this. So, moving into New Year's, I wanted to do a character focus on someone who goes through a big change in the Bible. And you might have already guessed who it is, because I mentioned it in the last character focus. We're going to look at King Nebuchadnezzar. There will be a bit of overlap with Daniel, so you might recognize some of the passages. But I really thought this guy was really interesting and goes through an interesting journey of his own, and that's worth really exploring because it's the kind of thing that as Christians we're going to want to think about. And it's interesting to see his journey from, savage pagan king Nebuchadnezzar to, humbled man who worships the Lord, King NebuCHADnezzar. Bit of a playing around with the spelling. No, actually look up how to spell his name. You'll see how that works. Anyway, so I'm going to just talk about who this guy is, go through his Bible history, and see what we can cherry pick out of that for ourselves. So who is Nebuchadnezzar? Well, Nebuchadnezzar II, or Nebuchadnezzar the Great, was the second king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which is 605 BC to 562 BC. You've probably heard of him through the book of Daniel or the previous character focused video. And historically, he is quite famous as well because of his involvement in projects like the Hanging Gardens and other things like that, as well as being one of the most powerful kings of his time because Babylon was a very, very strong empire back then. Probably by the time Nebuchadnezzar starts to be a focus in the story, it's probably the biggest superpower of the day. And you notice throughout the times there are different superpowers in the world in different centuries. And yeah, Nebuchadnezzar inherited this great kingdom and made it even greater. So basically his story intersects with Israel in that he's sent against Judah in the reign of Jehoiakim. I think I've hopefully spelled that right, or pronounced that right. So Jehoiakim is Nebuchadnezzar's vassal. So basically he's been defeated by Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar allows him to stay as the steward over Israel to look after it on the condition that Jehoiakim is loyal to him, pays him homage, and is aligned with him in matters of war, I suppose, and stuff. But Jehoiakim rebels. So the thing is, Judah had rebelled against God, much like Israel, and they had their own destruction. I think Judah hung on a bit longer. The people were rebellious against God, so God sent someone to subjugate them, and then they rebelled against that person as well. So very rebellious, very stiff-necked. And basically, this is in response to breaking the covenant, right? See, the idea was you follow God, you get blessed. If you don't follow God, well, you build up sin against yourself, and then ultimately you get to one of the worst curses, if not the worst one, where God just basically breaks down the kingdom, right? So we get to this in 2 Kings chapters 24 and 25, and God uses Nebuchadnezzar as his agent to basically pull apart Judah and take the exiles all the way back to Babylon, which belongs to the tribe of the Chaldeans, where I think Babylon was their main city. Anyway, so what happens is once we're done with the war bit, the king instructs his master of the eunuchs, whose name is Ashpenaz, to bring some of the children of Israel, the king's descendants, and some of the nobles and the young men who, have a nice face like myself, and gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, much like myself as well, and who had the ability to serve in the king's palace, whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. So what happens is Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, but he can't remember the dream. So what he does is he's very troubled by it. It's not a matter of, I had a crazy dream last night, but I forgot. It was obviously very disturbed by this, which would have been a divine thing. And he wants to be told the dream and the explanation of the dream. So as this conversation goes, I want you to tell me this dream and interpret it for me. Okay, well, you tell us the dream. We'll interpret it for you. No, I don't remember it. You need to tell me the dream. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, okay. Well, then I'll just kill all of you because I have anger issues. You'll find that this guy does have a lot of anger issues, unfortunately. And he often responds to things with very serious threats. And we can talk a bit about that later. So the wise men can't do this because this is a bit ridiculous. And so he's threatened death on them if they can't meet his command. So what happens is, I think Daniel seeks out the Lord, and they pray about it, and God gives him the ability to know the dream and then interpret the dream, which would spare them all from death. And so what he does is he goes to the king and says, "You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. The image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thigh of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on the feet of iron and clay, and broke them into pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away, so that there was no trace of them to be found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the entire earth." I very much love the imagery of the Bible, especially when they're explaining visions and dreams, and Daniel has a lot of those, and it's an amazing book. It really just boggles the imagination. It's so wonderful. So that was the dream. And then he gives him the interpretation of the dream. "You, O king, are the King of Kings. For the Lord of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, all the beasts of the field, and the birds of heaven, he has given them into your hands and made you ruler over them. You are the head of gold. But after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze." Obviously, the second kingdom is the kingdom of silver. "And that which the kingdom of bronze shall rule over the earth. The fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided," which is not what you want for a kingdom. "Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with the ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron doesn't mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all the other kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain and its interpretation sure. Just like pretty much everything that God says, which is very nice, gives us hope. Well, the king gives God glory and acknowledgement and promotes Daniel to a high position, and at Daniel's petition, he also promotes his 3 friends, who you might remember are named, where did I put them? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Sorry, it's a bit hard to quite commit those to memory. They're Babylonian names, actually, not even their Israelite names. So, this guy is a pagan ruler, so he has his own Babylonian gods and demons and constellations and beliefs and whatever. But given that he is a polytheistic person and rules over lots of different nations and sort of allows them to an extent, keep their beliefs, he wouldn't mind acknowledging the existence of God, but he would just, I suppose, be one of many gods. And worshipping and acknowledge all these many gods would still be okay. So we're starting to see seeds planted in him where he's starting to understand God's presence and glory and, dealing in matters of mankind. But we still have a way to go before he really starts to glorify and acknowledge God the way that he should be. So what he does later on, this is in a very similar story to the Tower of Babel. What he does is he sets up an image of gold, and where pretty much it's set up so that people all around can see it. It's a bit like the Tower of Babel. We're gonna, come together and build this tower, and we're gonna be so successful that we'll be our own gods. And so it's a bit like that, except it's just, oh no, it's not that we're all working together. It's just me. I'm just the godlike figure. And he wants people to bow down and worship this figure that he's made. I think it was actually maybe an image of himself. No, it just says it's a gold image. Pretty narcissistic anyway. But would you believe it? Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they decide that I want to do that. And so they basically get dobbed in. And he likes them enough to give them a chance, because obviously they've proven themselves enough. And the choice is, well, look, when you hear the music, bow down to this image, or I'll throw you into the furnace. And in a move of stunning faith and, religious loyalty, they're basically like, no, we believe God can save us, but even if he chooses not to, we're still not going to bow down and worship this thing that you've made, because they understand that is wrong. And of course, things like idol worship, that's basically what Israel into this in the first place, and they're not really thinking in for a penny, in for a pound. They're like, we're going to do the right thing. So they bravely refuse because their loyalty is to God, and so that enrages him. He's like, oh, well, a bit like the Pharaoh in Egypt when Moses was trying to get him to set the Hebrews free. He's basically like, oh, okay, well, let's see if your God can stop me from throwing you into the fire and killing you. Long story short, he throws him into the fire. The fire is hot enough to kill the guards standing near the fire. But the 3 Israelites are okay. In fact, he looks in, and there is a 4th man with them that he describes as like a son of God. Obviously a supernatural being. And so he has them come out. They don't even smell of smoke. And God has completely protected them. And Nebuchadnezzar comes into a situation where he has to acknowledge God's sovereignty again. He gives praise to God and says that no man can speak against their God in the future. And then he promotes them. And in typical fashion, there is a violent threat to anyone who doesn't speak well of the God of Israel. Dude has some serious issues with rage and violence, and if you struggle with that, we'll maybe try to talk on that, maybe do a bit of a prayer for you or something. But hey, look, as with things that we're working through, we're not necessarily always changed overnight, and so there's still more humbling to be done, because Nebuchadnezzar isn't quite giving God the glory that he should. Why? Because he's still so proud and set in his ways. Although he is doing a bit better than the Pharaoh of Egypt. That guy just was a hard nut to crack. So then he has another troubling dream, which he very wisely gets all the other wise men who failed him the last time to try to interpret the dream. And then Daniel steps forward, and like last time, is the one who actually talks about the dream and interprets it. And this one goes, I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth. Its height was great. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached the heavens, and it could be seen to the ends of all the earth. Its leaves were lovely, its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade around it, or under it. The birds of heaven dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, Chop down the tree and cut off its branches. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts get out from under it, and the birds from its branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump and the roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven. Let him graze with the beasts on the grass of the earth. Let him be changed from that of a man. Let him be given the heart of a beast. Let 7 times pass over him. This decision is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, gives it to whomever he will, and sets it over the lowest of men. That's the dream. The interpretation of that dream is the tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and I'm not going to describe the tree again because I already described it before. That is you, O king, who has grown and become strong, for your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. Remember, leader of an empire that is the superpower of its time. This guy commands respect. And inasmuch as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree, and whatever the watcher says, what that means is they shall drive you from men. Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they will make you eat grass like oxen, and they will wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times, or 7 years, shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whoever he chooses. And inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump and roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you after you come to know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening to your prosperity. And basically what happens is a year passes, and he's still a bit prideful. He looks around and gives himself the glory for this. Oh, look what I've done, look what I've made. And a bit like the rooster crowing once Peter denies him 3 times, that's when the promise becomes fulfilled, and they actually drive him out of the city because he's actually so mad. Like they can't deal with him, he can't lead, he can't do anything. And he just starts walking around on all 4s and exists with these oxen or whatever animal, and is just eating grass and not in his right mind. And then, as the promise works, he returns to his senses after 7 years. He's just out there for 7 years and then returns to his senses and then goes back and takes charge again. And he had this to say after that ordeal out in the fields. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" And so, once he's returned to power, he's a changed man and a humbled man. And he has a far greater respect and reverence for the Lord, a better understanding of his sovereignty, of his purpose. And it's really interesting to see how the experience with Israel, especially Daniel, God used that to speak into this man, this Gentile, pagan, very wrathful, prideful man. And uses all that not just to fulfill his will in Israel, but then uses Israel to change the heart and mind of this proud king, to humble him and help him to know God and his sovereignty and his justness. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story. Well, what can we take away from that? Well, like I said, getting back to how God used Nebuchadnezzar for his purpose and then used Daniel to speak into Nebuchadnezzar's life, God is willing and able to use anyone, to save anyone. He can choose whoever he wants to, because his ways aren't like our ways and his thoughts higher than our thoughts. And he can choose even the most unlikely person. And I would have thought that the way the world judges people, I would have slipped through the cracks and not been considered worthy. But the Lord picked me. He picked Saul and turned him into the Apostle Paul. He even some of the 12 apostles seem to come from sketchy backgrounds. And that just goes to show that the Lord doesn't do things the way we do things. And he'll use and save anyone. He humbles the proud. Unfortunately, you might have found out the hard way as we go in life, and I reckon I definitely have. Sometimes God wants to give you a wake-up call because you're going the wrong way. You're sinning a bit too much. You're a bit arrogant. If God has to give you the wake-up call, it will be helpful because it's supposed to be, because it's to bring you back on track. But you're probably not going to like it. So show self-awareness and watch out for being proud. And since God is willing and able to save anyone, reveal himself to anyone, and humble anyone, then we should be willing to believe and pray open-mindedly. Well, basically, I'm going to let Paul say it for me. 1 Timothy 2, verses 1 to 4. Therefore I exhort, first of all, that supplications, prayers, and intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Saviour, who desires all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. God does it, and he says it. And I think we have what is it called? A precedent here where God's is like, yeah, got this super powerful man, pagan man, angry man, proud man. Even a heart like that I will change. And so it sort of gives us a lot of hope when we look at situations. We might be praying for a certain government, or we might be praying for a certain friend or family member, and they're just like, message isn't getting through. But God can get the message through to them. So just keep believing and just keep trying. And keep showing grace, I suppose. And I know it can seem a bit lectury. It's hard. I get it. It's easier said than done. And a lot of the Christian walk is. And if it weren't for God, it would be impossible. But even when we're walking with God, and you've got all the demonic interference and the weakness of your flesh, it can be hard to always do the right thing. But we can have hope because it's possible. It's possible, so always believe. Always believe that you can do anything God has asked of you, as long as you do it the right way. And always believe that God can save that person you're witnessing to or praying for, because God wants to save them. God can save them. He died. Jesus died for them. And God doesn't want his word to be in vain. He doesn't want the things you do for him to be in vain. If he's given you a ministry and gifts and whatever, he doesn't want that to just not work out. So keep believing, keep praying for people. And I suppose the idea of me doing this just before New Year's is just because it represents new beginnings. And we're probably going to be going into 2025, and maybe some of us will be reflecting on the year that's passed and the person we've been. And we're looking to the year ahead and thinking, who do I want to be next year? Who do I want to become? How is my life going to change, and how am I going to make that change? Well, I would say if you have any anger issues or pride issues like NebuCHADnezzar had, get on top of that. Learn to be a good listener. Listen, obey, because obedience to God really gets you very far. But, I don't know, just be smart and try not to figure out things on the fly or the hard way. Just figure out your goals. Find out how you're going to achieve those goals. Believe that you can achieve them. And, yeah, just actually know the path from the beginning. Look it up on Google if you have to, but don't wait till things happen before you respond. Don't try to feel your way around in the dark. There are easier ways. And looking back on my year, I just want to say this podcast, while it's not huge, it has grown a lot, and I've gotten a lot more viewers. I think Facebook has helped with that. Networking with people, meeting new people has helped with that. We've got the YouTube channel up now because the app I was using changed to Riverside, which allows me to record one thing and then put it onto YouTube and Spotify. So that's one thing. If I had to sum up this year for myself, and again, I just want to thank everyone who's joined us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting this channel throughout the year. I'm very grateful. Thank you, and welcome to the new people and the people who have stuck around even longer than just 2024. Thanks for sticking around. It's been good to have you, and God bless you all. Hoping that we stick together and get great things done in 2025, which is, as of this recording, 2 days. I'm probably going to get this up tomorrow, so it's one sleep away. If you're going to get any sleep, we'll see. I'll let you decide. Yeah. So hopefully it's going to be a powerful year for the podcast. We've set up some really great foundation, and now we can just keep building on that. For myself, I started the year with a lot of stress and mental health problems, and I've pretty much left them all behind, and I'm so much stronger and happier. I'm doing really, really well.
But obviously, spent the whole year grieving. It was hard for me to say goodbye to the house, and there was the mammoth task of that, and looking for a new place. And then I thought, no, that was bad. But then when my special girl left, that was about 10 times worse. And having to move house didn't feel like a big deal anymore. So unfortunately, that's something I was really wrestling with even now. Obviously, that grief and that pain has brought up a lot of other thoughts and feelings, especially linking back to things in history that sort of shaped who I've become, and how that may or may not have affected the relationship. And so, yeah, it's been quite an emotional year, very successful, and I reckon 2025 is going to be awesome, God willing, just given the foundation I've been setting and the goals I've got. I reckon it'll be great. Yeah, but I look at how much I've lost this year and how painful it's been, and so it simultaneously makes this year one of the best and one of the worst. Definitely better than 2020 and 21, am I right? I mean, yeah, those were some pretty bad years. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we could all agree, yes, those were the 2 worst years of our lives, hands down. There's not really much else that could compare. I think we can all agree that was tough. And by the grace of God, I've finally been able to put pretty much all that behind me, and that's good. So, yeah, all the best with New Year. Thanks for listening to this podcast episode, or if you're watching the YouTube video, thank you for watching that. Thank you for following this channel. I really hope you take a lot out of the lessons we've read today, and keep seeing how God can use you in new ways, develop you in new ways. Don't be afraid of new opportunities. Don't be afraid to put in the work and stick at things. Don't be afraid to confront yourself if you have to. And let God speak great things to you through the Bible, give you some fresh revelations you haven't heard before. Keep up with your prayer, your Bible reading. I mean, we all know that physically, in order to function, we have to breathe, we have to eat, we have to drink. I mean, if you're not doing that stuff, you're in for a very unhappy and unhealthy time. So make sure you're doing well with your praying in the Spirit, reading the Bible, praying, or even, again, encourage fasting. That does you some good. And keep believing for change. Keep being surrendered to God. Keep praying for breakthrough and other people to have breakthrough and for them to get saved. And Happy New Year, happy 2025, and guys, I guess that's it. I've said my final message, and I'll see you next year. It's been a good one, and if your year's been painful like mine, I hope that some good has come out of it, and I hope that you can leave that in the past and approach the new year with some hope and some healing. And remember, this channel is always here for you. I mean, if you're excited to watch the installments each month, that's great. But we always have the opportunity to comment on these videos or the podcast episodes, the Facebook. There are so many ways that you can contact me. So if you need advice, I'm not the smartest person in the entire world, but I can try to comfort you. I can try to help you if you need anything, even if it's just prayer. I can do prayer, and that's at least a small token gesture I can give you. Is if you need prayer, I can pray for you. So, peace out. May God use you mightily, and you have great peace and strength and blessing and anything you could ever need and more. May God put that on your life in 2025.